Well, I get the great job of being between you guys and getting out of here, so I'll try to keep this quick and keep this moving. My talk this afternoon is getting past our guards, so just want to talk a little bit about disease sneaking into our farms here. So, one of the important one of the important things to realize is that for a disease event to occur, you really need three components to happen. So you need to have the host available, you need to have the pathogen, and you need to have a favorable environment. So all three of these things need to be combined in order for you to get a disease event. If you have the pathogen and the host, but you don't have the environment favorable, you won't get a disease. If you have the pathogen and the environment, for example, you won't get disease. If you have the host in the environment but no pathogen, you won't get disease. So that's what we're really trying to do with our pig farms here. We have our susceptible hosts, so they would be the pigs. They have the favorable environment, and we're trying to keep the pathogen away from them. So there's five main routes for disease transmission, or five main ways that disease are transmitted amongst animals: aerosol, direct contact, fomites, oral ingestion, and vectors. So vectors would be something like a fly or a tick or something. Oral ingestion is pretty self-explanatory. Fomites are an animate object. So for example, your sort board that you're using to sort pigs, for example, that would be a great example of a fomite. Or your feeder in the barn, like the actual feeder would be the fomite. Direct contact is animals touching or in contact with other animals. So that's an important way. And aerosols is by air. So how do we best minimize disease transmission? It's not a trick question. Ah, yes, not another biosecurity talk, but kind of a biosecurity talk. So it really is one of the pillars in the swine industry. So it has really allowed us to be very productive. It's allowed us to prevent a lot of diseases from occurring. It helps us to eliminate disease. So we've been able to eliminate diseases in our herds because of biosecurity and modern swine production. We've also been able to reduce exposure to diseases. It increases our productivity, which is certainly beneficial for us and our bottom line. And it involves putting up many safeguards or hurdles. So when your veterinarian is telling you to do a specific thing, and it's not because we like to make sure that we make your life just a little bit more difficult, it's because there's a reason why we're doing that. So we're trying to put these hurdles up for the pathogens and not for us. So there's lots of different pathways into the barn. So if we look at this graphic here, these are just a lot of ways that things can get into the barn. So we have air, we have feed coming in, we have water coming in. Hopefully we don't have too many pests coming in, but it does happen. Fomites, so we have boxes coming in, we have equipment coming in, medicators, injectors, that kind of stuff. We have caretakers coming in. And hopefully not, but there's also the potential for infected animals coming in. So aerosol transmission occurs when tiny droplets containing disease particles within are inhaled. So it requires short distances and close contact, and many diseases can be aerosolized. So these diseases here are just a list of some of the diseases that can be aerosolized and transferred via this mechanism. So a big one would be PRRS, influenza, PD, mycoplasma, the swine vesicular diseases, which is always gets everyone's hackles up when we hear that, APP, TGE, and ASF. Oh, just go back. So if you look at the picture here, you can see this isn't a barn on fire. This is metabolism at its finest. So this is a 24,000 head nursery. There is a pile of metabolic water being pushed out of these fans. So in -40, you will see all the moisture and all the fans pushing all this moisture out. In these moisture droplets, there is potential for pathogens and for things to be in there. So this was a nursery, and right across the road was a sow farm in this situation. And this nursery did a great job of infecting that sow herd across the road with influenza. So one of the ways that we can intervene with aerosol transmission is physical distance. Barn filtration is another mechanism. We can eliminate the disease. We can use masks, for example, or decrease our exposure to the pathogen. Vaccination and biocontainment. So, does anyone know where this picture is from? Yeah. Anyone that wasn't at the last talk that knows where this picture is from? It's not from Britain. It's actually from Saskatchewan. So it's a poster. It says quarantine for foot and mouth disease. So there was an outbreak of foot and mouth disease in Saskatchewan in 1951 and 52. And the big concern was aerosol transmission. So it was actually really quite good that it happened in the middle of winter. But this is a real poster and a real farmer in Saskatchewan that had a really bad situation happen, but it was able to be contained because of, like, physical distance would have been a big thing. They quarantined all the animals around them and removed them. So oral ingestion is when the animal ingests the disease-causing agent, so they actually consume it, either by eating the feed, drinking the water, licking or chewing. So I love pictures. So this is a picture in the Montreal airport, and this is actual advertisement that's happening in Canada to make sure that we don't allow ASF infected products to come into Canada and accidentally get fed to swine. So diseases contracted by the oral route, there's quite a good list of them. Colibacillosis, cryptocampi, cysticercus, erysipelas, lepto, PCV2, PED. I won't list them all. What I want you to realize is that as we go through, some of these are certainly in different areas. So there's different mechanisms and multiple mechanisms by which some of these diseases are transferred from one animal to another, or from one farm to another, or from objects to another. So interventions for oral transmission, there's a lot of different ways we can do this. So water filtration and sanitation would be a big one. We know that there is definitely some pathogens that are actually in the water and coming into the farm unfiltered and unsanitized can actually infect pigs. Knowing your feed sources and the feed ingredients. What are you feeding? Where is it from? What's it been exposed to? These are certain things. Heat treatment, for example. So there's certain amino acids and stuff that come in that have potential to carry pathogens on them. These are being placed in rooms with heat and time, and to make sure that any potential pathogens in them are being eliminated. You can remove certain ingredients. So everyone used to have porcine plasma in every one of their diets, and now not a lot of people are using porcine plasma just because some of the risks involved. So that would be a good example of removing a certain ingredient. Keeping your bins closed. So you might not be able to see, but this is a lovely little group of birds popping in and out of this open bin. So this is certainly a great way to get salmonella, for example, into those farms and into those pigs. Making sure that you get your dead stock out of the pens before other pigs start chewing on them and use them as a toy, as Miranda so aptly described. We've all seen that happen, and we all know what we're talking about. So minimizing pests. So making sure that you actually have a rodent control program, and you really make sure that you're trying to eliminate and minimize the amount of pests that are on farm, because there is a lot of pathogens that can be actually carried by these pests. So leptospirosis, for example, is something that we vaccinate sows for with your pre-farrow or your farrowing type vaccines. So leptospirosis is something that is carried by rodents So rodents and pigs in that interface does increase our chance of having leptospirosis problems. Separating sick animals, that's another way. So, if you have an animal, for example, with brachyspira, and they are having dysentery or bloody diarrhea in a pen, pulling that animal out of the pen and not having that animal spread bloody diarrhea around that pen and having the other pigs come and be exposed to it is one way to help minimize or control some of these transmissions. Direct contact, so this is when animals have to touch each other or be in contact with each other. It may be fluids, for body fluids, for example. It may be horizontal transfer from a sow to a piglet or a sow to her litter. It may also occur during breeding. So example, if you have semen that's infected with something and you introduce it to the sow, you may be potentially bringing a pathogen in that way. Certainly AI and a lot of the safeguards that were like artificial insemination, not artificial intelligence, just to be clear on that, is one way that we can actually help eliminate and avoid that. But yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that we can bring these things in, and just we have to be aware of what potentials there are. So diseases that rely on direct contact, again, the list is quite extensive. Colibacillosis or E. coli wins the prize. So it can be spread by all different ways. So air, feed, the contact, the fomites, all of that. Again, influenza is on the list. PRRS is on the list. Erysipelas, an old but still relevant disease. So we still see erysipelas, even though we vaccinate for it and we control it. Circovirus, ASF, mycoplasma, hopefully no one's seeing ASF. But yeah, so parvovirus, so that's a disease that's shed from pig to pig. Not common, we vaccinate for it, but it is something that pigs can certainly pass on to other pigs. So another thing to think about is that as we're taking these sows out of stalls and stuff and putting them in pens, that's going to change the dynamic for transmission from pig to pig. So this may change the dynamic and may change what we see on farm with some of these diseases. Brachyspira salmonella would be another one. Rotavirus, so that's piglet contact with another infected piglet is certainly one way that we get transmission of that. Trying to control or prevent direct contact, so knowing the source of the animals that are coming into your farm. I put modern swine production in there because we are actually really, really good at preventing a lot of pathogens from coming in and contact with other animals, just because we do have animals in a farm, in a closed barn with limited exposure to other animals. Artificial insemination, as I mentioned, is one way of preventing direct contact with animals. Avoiding assembly yards, so having animals assembled into groups or being exposed to that before they would come onto a farm, for example, or into a slaughter plant, for example, is one way to help prevent some of that. Pest control, again, as mentioned, that's certainly a way to help deal with that. So again, fomite transmission. Fomite is the inanimate object or the surface that's contaminated. Feces or bodily fluids. So there's a lot of things that we would handle every day that would be considered a fomite. So that would be our boots, our equipment, handling gear, rattle paddle, sort board, our housing, our transport. So this is, the pigs going on the trailer. The trailer would be considered a fomite in that situation. Water, soil, and treatment equipment, for example. If treatment equipment is being moved between farms or between barns, it's a potential method for transmission. And again, the list of culprits is much the same. So there's a few offenders that end up on a lot of the lists. So PRRS, again, is a really big one that we worry about. We're pretty lucky in Western Canada just because we don't actually have very much PRRS. In the US, it's just rampant, and there's multiple strains on farm, and it really is quite an issue for them. PED and Delta coronavirus, TGE, that would be one that I think kind of really warrants our attention for this transmission by fomites. So when we're talking about transport, we're talking about trailers. PED did a great job being transferred between trailers and one farm to the next farm. So that would be one. Seneca virus A, again, would be one of those viruses that is coming off of transport into assembly yards. And that is causing grief out in Eastern Canada right now as we speak. So some of these pathogens are really close. We have had, positive PED sample swabs all over. So you can get really close to the water, without getting wet. So it's always important to keep our guard up for that. Controlling transmission by fomites, so clean and disinfecting. I mean, we are experts at that, I would say. We're really good at pressure washing and making sure things get clean. Allowing time and temperature to do its thing. Fresh air and sunshine kills a lot of stuff. So having that time and temperature allowance is good. Controlling the entry to the farm, so making sure that people aren't walking in with street shoes or street clothes. Changing boots, being aware of surfaces and potential contamination would all be ways that we can help control disease transmission by fomites. So vector transmission is kind of the last one we're talking about. It's not as big of a deal. I mean, we do have certainly flies and mosquitoes, I would say, in hog barns, but it's when we have some insect or some vector essentially transmitting from one animal to another. And I would say it's probably less of an important, but I mean, certainly something we still have. As soon as you get manure, we all know that flies come along with, so it's something we deal with, and we just try to minimize what we're doing. So again, what can be transmitted? There's actually quite a list. Good old E. coli is on there, colibacillosis. PRRS and Seneca strep suis would be one that would probably be a surprise to many people, knowing that strep suis can be spread from pig to pig via flies. Brachyspira is another one, potentially. And ideally, the key is just to manage insects in this situation. So what can we do? I would say knowledge is power. So when we know what potentially can come in and how it comes in, we can kind of put up these safeguards and help to minimize what comes in. Again, biosecurity is key. I really didn't want it to be a biosecurity talk, but it kind of ended up being a biosecurity talk. Knowing these pathways into the barn, like knowing how these pathogens get in, really allows us to prevent them from getting in. And an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Thank you for your attention.